Hello again, everyone. New project going to get started on today. This is a 66 Mustang Fastback, and I've added the headrest. You probably hope you've watched that video where we put headrest on the seats. It turned out really well. Now we're going to do a project that's a little more complicated. We're going to be installing electric power steering. This is just a manual steering car, and out on the highway I don't really have any problem with the way it drives. It sits on the road good, but when I go to park, like if you go to a cruise in or a show and you're trying to back up and park in a certain spot, it's kind of tough to get them front wheels to turn when you're not moving very fast. Plus we've got the small steering wheel, which makes it even harder. So we're going to be putting on electric power steering. We'll be doing that in the other shop where I have the car lift. So let's get started. A good example of trying to steer when you're moving really slow. I do have all new front end parts on this Fastback when I restored it, so it's pretty stiff. No loose motion in the front end, but just a little hard to steer with the manual steering. I will have to put it on the lift to do some things on this power steering, but right now we're going to leave it right here. And let me show you the power steering kit that I've purchased, and we'll go over it and explain how it works. I decided to go with the EPAS. That's the brand. There's a picture of their logo. I considered other options like just regular power steering add-on with hoses and power steering pump, and I just really didn't want to get into all of that, having to change pulleys on the engine. And now this kit that I ordered, it does come with the I Did It steering column, a little short steering column. You can see it right here. It's already attached to the motor. And here's all the parts we'll need to put on the electric power steering. First we have this is an I Did It black powder finish. That's the color of it. That's a steering column, and it's already mated up to the motor. It was part of the kit. You can buy it without the steering column, and you can cut the original column, and it would work fine, but I wanted a tilt steering wheel, so I went ahead and sprung for the additional column. And this has the GM color wires. My car has these same color wires on it because I had to put a new turn signal switch in a couple of years ago, and I think these colors will match up. If not, we'll get that figured out. There's a tilt and turn signal levers for the column. This is called a D shaft, and don't pull it out too far. Small shaft slides inside the large one. That's what connects your motor, the shaft end, down to the steering box. And we have these two universal couplings. This one is splined, so that goes on the motor. And the other end goes on the small D shaft. And this end goes down at the steering box. And the large end, of course, goes on the end of the shaft. The small end goes on the steering box, and we do have to make some modifications to it for that to fit, but we'll get into that later. You get a firewall plate with a bearing that mounts where the old steering column 3-hole plate is. You just take it out, put this one in, and this shaft goes through that bearing to give it support at the firewall. Electronics, wiring's pretty simple. This is it's called a control box. We'll mount it up under the dash somewhere. And the kit I bought does have the potentiometer for the amount of power steering assist that you want. So if you're out on the highway, you would turn this down, and if you're getting ready to park, you turn it up and you get more assist. So that's on a potentiometer. That'll mount on the dash, and this is a plastic shaft, so we can cut that shaft to the length we want where it'll look nice on the dash. And one other thing that I'm going to do that didn't come with the kit, this is a circuit breaker, 60 amp breaker that I'm going to put in the main power line that goes straight to the battery. I'm going to put this circuit breaker in that line just for some additional protection. Now, as far as instructions, I went online to the company, EPAS, and they have well-written instructions step-by-step on what you do to install this, so we'll be using those. I may print those out. I have them saved on my phone. We may go ahead and just print them out where we'll have a paper copy, easier to look at. So what all do we need to do to install this? Well, you have to remove the old steering column. You have to remove the gearbox, and it'll have the long shaft that runs up through the column. That's part of the gearbox, so that'll all have to come out. That's where the lift's going to come in handy, because we'll have to put the car up on the lift, and that'll come out through the bottom. Once we get the gearbox out, then we do have to cut the shaft on it, and then we have to grind or cut it to a D shape, so this will fit into it. It'll be the same size as this small shaft when we're finished. It'll just have a D shape to it like that. This column is already, as I said, it's mounted to the motor, so there's nothing to cut here. This is ready to go into the car. You do use the original clamp around the dash that goes in this area. And that holds the column up against the bottom of the dash. And then once we get all of that mounted, it's just a matter of wiring it up. It's just a couple of wires you have to hook up. Yeah, I think it's this large red wire and this smaller red wire. And then the motor itself, that connection there, plugs in right here on the end of this, on the end of the control module. This connection, it goes to the potentiometer. It plugs in right here. Now we'll be taking the seat out, the driver's seat. That way we'll have nothing in the way, because we're gonna have to lay on our back and on the floor of the car there to get everything mounted the way it should mount the new steering column. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it up on the lift to make it easier to get to these nuts in the bottom of the seat. Now we'll be able to get to these seat nuts a lot easier. Just remove these plugs. 2 more here. And the nuts are up underneath those. Four plugs removed and the 4 nuts. So the seat is loose now. So first thing we'll do is disconnect the battery, then we'll remove the steering wheel. We got the seat out, we got the steering wheel off, the hub, center hub's off. So now we should be able to pull the column loose and get it out of the way. There's a nut right there and there. We got both of those off. There's a bracket. Need to unplug this harness going up the steering column. And steering column is loose, so we can pull it out. Rubber gasket that went around the column. And here's the rest of the bracket. Mounts up on underneath the dash like that. And here's the end cover. It went down on the gearbox. I think I need to put something over this shaft because I don't want it scratching the dash. We're ready to raise the lift back up and work on that steering box. There are 3 bolts that have to come out. Well, I hope I don't have to pull that exhaust manifold off, but I may have to. It is really close. Gearbox, it sets against this frame, but it also sets on top of the frame. You can see it goes back in on top of it. So I'm taking the exhaust pipe loose from the manifold flange, and my plan is to cut the shaft off of the steering box. Then I think I can remove the 3 bolts, scoot the box towards the firewall, and get it out. I'm gonna cut it back in here, leave plenty of length because it's 1.5 inches that you need from here to the where you shape it for the D channel. So we'll try to cut it way back in here. And let's see how this works. Well, I think I'm through. The shaft is laying down, and you can see, I think you can see it's straight out of the box, and then it bends down. So I think I have it loose. We're gonna let the car back down and see if it'll come out. And it's loose. There we go. I think now we pull these 3 bolts out. I think we can scoot the gearbox towards the firewall and then drop it down to where I unhook the exhaust pipe. I hope. We shall see. Before we loosen the bolts in the gearbox, I'm going to remove this nut and get this front end assembly out of the way. So we got a key and a nut to remove, and then we'll have to, hopefully this will drop down. Okay, pitman arm is unhooked. So let's remove those 3 bolts and see if we can get this out. These are 5/8 bolts, 5/8 head bolts, 1/2 inch diameter. Okay, all 3 bolts are loose. I'm just gonna leave them in the frame. Got them, have them pulled back to where they're not in the way. So let's see if we can get the steering box out now. Well, there it is. It wasn't easy. I had to do some twists and turns and stood on 1 foot, as they would say. But we got it out without taking the exhaust manifold out. And hopefully this shaft will be shorter. That's what was binding when I was trying to get it out. It would be in the way. So hopefully this shaft will be shorter. That'll give us a little more room to twist it and get it back up in there. So our next step is to work on this shaft, get it ready for that coupling. I did print out the instructions. Cut the shaft 2 inches from here to the end. Then I've been making it into a D shape, and I'm just using a side grinder. I'm trying not to get the shaft super hot. I'll grind a while and then stop and let it cool. And I'm about to the point where the coupling is fitting on there. There's a coupling. And it's still tight. And it does have set screws too. So now, the next step is to cut this 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark it, cut it off another 1/2 inch, and then we'll see if we'll make sure that the universal joint slides all the way as far as it's supposed to. There's our 1.5 inch mark. So I'll just take a cut-off wheel on the grinder and cut that off. All right, we got a good tight fit. And we've got a stop back here where I stopped with the grinder. So it's going to go back so far. Maybe this will go back in easier than it came out, I hope. And yes, it did. Not a problem at all with that shorter shaft on it. So let's get the bolts tightened down, the exhaust hook backed up, the pitman arm hooked up, and I think we'll be finished underneath. And that's going to do it for part 1. Stay tuned for the next video. We'll be finishing up the electric power steering install on the 66 Mustang Fastback. Well, we hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, how about giving us a like and subscribing to our channel? Thanks.